Welcome to the Habitat Podcast, the podcast for wildlife habitat management, hunting strategy, and land stewardship. And now, your host, Jared Van Hees.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Habitat Podcast. I'm your host, Jared Van Hees, and we have another great episode for you today. It is fall food plot season. I hope you all are doing well and getting your plots in the ground, prepared, getting ready to plant, maybe fertilizing. I know I'll be doing that this weekend with my brassicas and whatnot, and then again with my cereal grains in September. So I hope everybody has no equipment failures while you're out there this weekend, and hang in there and get your stuff planted. Looks like there could be some rain in the future for us here. I want to thank you listeners for coming back once again. Our episode today is with Chad Thalin of Stoney Creek Realty. We go through and ask Chad what we should look for when buying a recreational or hunting property. Now, I know a lot of you already have property. Some of you are like me and want to buy bigger stuff someday. Or maybe some of you don't even have property yet and you might be thinking about buying some. Well, this is a great podcast for you. We get into what types of things to look for. We get into certain types of financing, location, different states. We talk about Indiana, Ohio a bunch. Just really a great episode on all things shopping for recreational property and even selling your recreational property in hopes to buy something bigger, or maybe you're just getting out of the game. Chad's very knowledgeable in the subject. He's been doing it a long time, along with habitat management. So I was pretty happy to have him on and chat, kind of a BS session with him and Brian on all things, like I said, looking for recreational or selling recreational property. I want to thank the Habitat Hook from Nations Creations for their support in the podcast. I've been using it to create some barriers around my tree stands recently where I don't want deer circling downwind. So what I'll do is I'll drop a couple trees to hide my entry into my stand. With the habitat hook, I can fell them in the correct direction or hinge cut them in the correct direction and get them to be a barrier behind my tree stand and off to the one side of my tree stand where I do not want the deer to come from. Now, the habitat hook, I use the aluminum extendable version. That's my favorite. It's super light. It extends out very far, and those can be found at thehabitathook.com or nationscreations.net. Go ahead and give them a like on Facebook. Tell them the Habitat Podcast sent you, and Nick will get you hooked up. I also want to thank Sound Barrier Hunting for their support in this podcast. Before we get into the show, we will revert to Adam Lewis from Sound Barrier Hunting. He was on a couple episodes ago, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his products before we get into it with Chad. Now, if you haven't been to our website lately at habitatpodcast.com, we got some new blogs up there on the anatomy of a white-tailed deer, where to aim, where we're looking to aim this fall with your arrows. Also, just a little bit of myth about where that shoulder is. That's a cool blog post that our friend Al did. We also have hats and shirts and decals up there, guys. Feel free to check those out along with all of our episodes over at habitatpodcast.com. We also have our land plan services. Right now, we're working on one in Iowa and also one in northern Michigan. So if you have any interest in our advice on your property, check out habitatpodcast.com/land plans. Probably going to be wrapping those up for this year here pretty soon, and then starting back up at the beginning of year or the end of deer season. So thank you all very much for joining once again. Here's Adam Lewis from Sound Barrier, and then we're going to roll straight into Chad Thalin on everything to look for in a recreational property.
Hi guys, Adam Lewis with Sound Barrier here. Did you know that noises you make while hunting, like accidental clanging metal of your stand, climbing sticks, release, buckles, or camera arm, can travel over half a mile into deer habitat? Studies show that whitetail do not tolerate these intrusive noises, and just one errant noise can ruin a hunting area. Since deer do not tolerate these unavoidable clings and clangs that we make with our gear, we developed a solution with the most soundproofing wraps available on the market. Using buck bumper on stands, sticks, camera arms, buckles, and pretty much all gear will eliminate these hunt-busting mistakes, increase encounters, and ultimately increase success. It's durable, easy to apply, weatherproof, and made in the USA. Check out our packages at soundbarrierhunting.com and use promo code HP to get 10% off and free shipping for your order today.
All right, everybody, we're back. Another episode of the Habitat Podcast. We have the man, the myth, the legend, Brian Hallbly on the line. What's going on, Brian?
Doing well. Getting real close to archery season's opening up here in about 6 weeks. So, getting pumped and staying busy. How about you?
Yeah, I just got back off a little camping trip, so I just realized after talking to you and Al today how much stuff I have to do between now and October 1st. So, and we also have our special guest tonight, Chad Thalin from Stoney Creek Realty on the line. How you doing, Chad?
Hey, doing great. How are you guys?
Good.
Doing great.
Thanks for having me on, boys.
Yes.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you both for coming on. I know you guys have heard Chad's voice before if you're a longtime listener. He was on episode 33. We talked about a lot of government programs and state-funded and federally funded things you can do to help increase your habitat and even get paid for it. So whoever hasn't listened to that, go back to episode 33. That's just a wealth of knowledge inside that podcast. So, Chad, welcome back. Glad to have you. If anybody also has seen our trivia nights, they're probably familiar with your mug, huh?
Yeah, unfortunately for them, right?
So what have you guys been up to? Brian, I know you were just talking about getting down to your lease this weekend. And Chad, you said you have a lease down there in Ohio as well, huh?
Yeah, getting pretty excited about it. Going to head down there next weekend, about 10 days or so, and hang some cameras. Not real good cell service down there where we're at in the unnamed area, but I've got to hang them. I like the cell cams, so I gotta hang them where, we got service up on top. There's, pretty good elevation change on this property. So where I'd want the camera, is not the best spot to get pictures, but it's, we'll hang them anyway, and I'll hang a couple of non-cells probably. But I won't even get to those, till probably November. So I'll just hang them and let them soak. But yeah, the mornings have been getting a little cooler here in southern Michigan, and it's kind of flipped that switch,
Definitely. I know we were just up in the UP, and the mornings up there and the evenings up there were super cool. And I tell you what, it's right around the corner. I even saw a couple of trees starting to turn right by my house here tonight. So quick little cold patch has a couple of trees, maybe thinking it's starting to get fall. I don't know if that's true or not, but good to have you both on. Brian, you said you got a big weekend planned at your lease this coming weekend, right?
Yeah, as I've mentioned before, the 311 that I'm on is part of a piece that totals about 1,500 acres, about 5 different leases. So I know, starting to get to know just about everybody on them. I've known probably half the guys have been friends of mine from hunting around Pennsylvania, but we try to get as many guys as we can down there, a couple times a year, just to make light work of everything. So Nick was kind enough to hook us up with some great food plot seed for the fall, and we're going to get that in, get a couple blinds erected, and then finish up some camera work, and we should be able to stay out of there till we get a cold front in October.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. How many guys are on that total 1,500, would you say?
There's like 4 guys per lease, so right around 20.
Okay. Got some room to spread out, though, if you think about it.
Yeah. And about half of them are from about 6 hours away, so it takes a lot of the pressure off there. When they're coming down, they're only there, a couple times during the year, so it makes it nice to spread out, like you said.
And Chad, what are you on down there? Are you on one with Zach or?
No, Zach and a friend of his helped me track this place down. Such a cool story, just friend of a friend of a friend said, as we drove by some some parcels. He says, you know what, you should go knock on this guy's door over here. He goes, I don't have time to stop with you today, but you got to swing by there in the morning. And I spent a couple days down there in a roadside motel. And so sure enough, I, went in there and knocked on a door probably 8:30, like a Wednesday or a Thursday morning. Didn't really expect to get anybody to answer the door, but the missus answered the door, and within 10 seconds I was inside the door, probably having a cup of coffee poured for me. It was just crazy how she welcomed me in, and my husband's in the shower here, sit at the table and wait for him. And, you feel pretty uncomfortable, but, after 5 minutes, he's out of the shower, comes out, and we start talking, and he obviously, right, didn't know these people from anywhere, had really no connection to them because they didn't know the person that told me to knock on their door. And what happens is 6 months later, I shot the nicest buck I've ever shot, and so has my 9-year-old son. So if you don't put yourself out there and knock on doors, you'll never know what you missed out on. And so, this guy ended up giving me permission, and beautiful parcel, and it's for sale. And who knows what may happen with that? I'll just leave it at that.
Nice. Very nice.
Yes, beautiful place in the eastern half of Ohio, we'll say. Not a county that's even in the top 15 for trophy bucks in Ohio, but yet I had the greatest experiences with mature bucks that I've ever had in a week's time that I've never had in 30 plus years of hunting in Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you bring that up. We wanted to get you on tonight and talk about what happens if you can't find a spot to hunt, in Michigan, banging on doors. You end up doing what I did, end up buying a small little chunker or whatnot. We want to talk about what to look for and all that good stuff we'll get into. But, I mean, if you've ever knocked on doors up here, it's probably, you could easily say 1 out of 20 might say yes.
Mm-hmm.
I've knocked on a lot of doors and I've gotten some permission. I think it has to do with just being polite and getting lucky. Honestly, just catching people at the right time. But if you can't find one, you end up having to buy property. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how maybe you got into hooking people up with their recreational lands here in Michigan, and now you're moving into Ohio and Indiana or Illinois?
Indiana will be licensed or available to be licensed in Illinois. But I don't, I'm not sure if we're going to, I guess I'll leave that open as an option. But for now, we're just, we're going to kind of focus on, I think, just Indiana and Ohio. But, it's just a case of supply and demand. And the demand is, if guys reach out to me and want me to represent them, on a transaction in Illinois, I'm sure as heck not going to say no, so we'll leave that open. But yeah, we're really looking forward to, working every day towards that goal of making that a reality with Stoney Creek, and just being able to show guys. And I hate to say this because Michigan is such a aesthetically beautiful state, right? All our lakes and rivers and rolling topography and all that stuff. But man, everywhere you go, you run into other hunters. You're constantly banging in to other hunters, unless you're going to go bury yourself in a swamp in northern Michigan or the UP. But there's so much less hunting pressure in these other states. To me, it's a really enjoyable experience to get out of Michigan and go check things out. But so that's kind of why we're going to expand a little bit and kind of go from there. So,
Okay, I guess before we dive into it too deep, why don't you tell us about, who you are, what you do, kind of how long you've been working on habitat. You're quite the habitat manager as well. So let's hear a little bit about you before we jump into maybe what you look for in a recreational property.
Yeah, so I started my real estate business kind of out of necessity back in about 2008. I had started my habitat business, as we have talked about before, in the early 2000s, and when the economy started going down in 2006, 7, I had a lot of clients that I was working on habitat and food plots for in northern Michigan that were feeling the effects of the downturn in the economy. There were a lot of tool and die and construction people from the Metro Detroit areas owned, fairly large parcels up in northern Michigan as their little playground. And, they started asking me to, if I could find anybody to maybe buy a 40 off their 200 or buy 20 of their, 180 to just kind of help offset the costs. And I just kept referring, these people on to other agents that I knew. And then I just finally smartened up a little bit and got my license on my own, and started selling recreational properties, and that's kind of just kind of kept steamrolling, and so it's a great combination. And so I get the habitat background, and then get to look at these parcels, from a different viewpoint of maybe a man or a woman, a real estate agent, maybe wearing a suit and tie or a sundress with, not appropriate clothing for walking a swamp in Michigan, or, corn and soybean and briar patches in southern Michigan. So my perspective is, pretty unique. It was back then, and it still is now, but there's a lot of brokerages now in Michigan and all over the United States, that specialize in hunting land, and you've had some of those guys on, and we've all seen their social media stuff, the mossy oaks and the whitetail properties, and the Realty now has got their hand in the game some, and so yeah, there's a lot of guys that are out there now specializing that weren't out there 10 or 12 years ago when I started. And it's good for competition's great, right? It keeps everybody honest, and and you're just able to bounce different things off of different people. And so having my habitat background gives me a unique perspective, I'd say, and my knowledge of the government programs, that can help you get monetary assistance to help with offsetting some costs of making your property, better for wildlife, all kinds of wildlife, is a great asset. So I use that all the time, and my clients, use those services from me all the time as well. So
Yeah, that's a nice feather to also have in your cap, be able to help somebody either with the project, with the transaction, or even with the monetary assistance. I like the way you put that. And all right. So if anybody wanted to really get started or was looking for a property to buy, or they wanted to sell theirs and upgrade, which, us guys with smaller farms probably think about often, where do we start, or where do you start?
Well, I think the first thing you got to do is, be realistic with yourself and your significant other, if there is one. You got to keep things happy on the home front. You really got to just figure out what your budget can be, and honestly be realistic with yourself. I get so many phone calls on, I'll list maybe $180,000 property, and I'll immediately get several phone calls, asking all about it, guys all excited, Man, this would be great. This is such a cool property. I've driven by it a million times, or I used to hunt it. And I tell them, are you pre-approved, or, do you know your own budget? And, well, no. And I'll give them some things to think about and go over. And, if they're not paying cash, then they're going to have to finance it. Call Greenstone Farm Credit or call your credit union and see if they'll work with you, and then let me know what they've said or how things look for you. And a lot of them I'll never hear from again because they got so excited about it. It was like, they really wanted that property, and then they went, oh crap. It's kind of like a Corvette or, some $100,000 vehicle we'd all love to have. And it all looks great. You get excited about it. And then you go, oh yeah, well, I can only afford an Impala. So you've got to know, and I don't mind talking to guys, about this stuff, even if they never become a customer. I'm good with that. We got to chat, and you got to hear somebody that was excited about something, and that that gets you a little bit fired up. And but you really got to know ahead of time, if you're seriously in the market for property, you need to have yourself budgeted, and you really should have yourself pre-approved. A lot of pre-approvals are only good for a couple months. So you may have to, if you're really in the market for property, you may have to go through a pre-approval every few months. But if you don't, and a hot property comes up for sale and there's multiple people looking at it and wanting to put in offers, that seller's going to accept an offer from a buyer who's been pre-approved versus the other two out of the 4 offers that they did get, that weren't pre-approved, because it's just going to take more time for them to get pre-approved, and it just stalls the whole process. So I'd say, you got to know your finances. You got to be realistic. And that's the first step. Have that ready, because then you can take some other things out of the equation when you're really ready to walk that property. You can say, okay, I already know I can afford it. I already know I can get the financing in a couple days. Now let's go look at, is this the actual property I really want to get into? Or was it just the thought of owning property that got you excited? So, there's a couple ways to go through that, but that's a long answer to your question, but I think I do that quite often.
I think that's a very good spot to start, though. I mean, it's like being pre-approved for your first home. I know we were pre-approved for a bunch more than what I could probably actually afford at that time. And it was just like, you want the biggest and the best, but then you look at the payment and you're like, dang it, that's crazy. But with the property thing, making something affordable is huge. And I know that Greenstone is a great place. I hear that a lot here in Michigan. I think they're like a 20% down deposit usually on recreational property. I ended up finding through a credit union where if it was under 20 acres, you only had to put 10% down. That kind of helped me when I was trying to accept the 15 acres in my head and not go for like a 30 or a 40. So there's a couple different places to check that I found. Brian, did you use up any financing with your first property, or are you just straight balling and paying cash?
Well, if you remember the story about the magazine that I had started and ended up selling right before that first piece of property. So I was fortunate to have some cash on hand.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay. So say we were pre-approved. I even saw a guy on Craigslist one time was selling a property, not through a realtor. And he said, don't even email me if you're not pre-approved, because I won't talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow. All right. Well, you a lot of tire kickers on Craigslist, though.
For sure.
Yeah. Yes, and that's, the busier that an agent or a broker is, the less he really wants to hear from tire kickers. He wants to hear, from people that are ready, willing, and able to buy. If they're super busy and they're cranking out tons of real estate listings and contracts and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm not super, super busy in real estate because it's a supplemental business with my habitat business and vice versa. So I don't get extremely overwhelmed with habitat business because I have the supplemental real estate business. So it kind of takes the pressure off things. And so, like I said before, I don't mind, talking to people who are tire kickers, because you never know. And 5 years down the road, that guy says, you talked to me about this property. You probably don't remember, 4 years ago, but you gave me some good advice, and I saved up and I got my credit, a little higher. So my interest rates were lower, and then I didn't forget that. And so, I'm calling you now because I am ready and I am willing and I am able and stuff. And so, those are the relationships that you build. And, and you just, I try it. Like I said, I talk to everybody I can. And so the tire kickers, yeah. The pre-approval thing gets more important as the dollar value of the sale goes up or the listing goes up, and that's residential and vacant and all that stuff, commercial, all that. I've had sellers, tell me, don't you even call me with anything unless they're pre-approved and, you've looked at their financials and that. They didn't even want to hear from me until those conditions were met. And I appreciate that. There's people out there that are extremely busy in business and wealthy, and they've got lots of irons in the fire, and they have hired me for a specific duty, and that was to sell their property. And so don't contact me unless, so that Craigslist guy, yes, I see that all the time. Just don't get a hold of me, because it can be daunting sometimes fielding tons and tons of calls. But hey, it is what it is. I consider it part of the business. So, but your Craigslist guy was probably a for sale by owner. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Yeah. And that's when those guys can be, but maybe you shouldn't have tried selling your property on Craigslist then, if you're, if you're worried about getting bombarded. Hired an agent, right? I mean, it's plenty of studies have shown that agents are worth their weight, right? In
Sure.
cash. So especially guys that specialize in things, I'm not ever going to claim and try to present myself to sell and market properly your $3.5 million estate in Birmingham, Michigan. Right? That's not me. I'll take the listing if you say, no, Chad, I want you to sell it for me. Well, sure, then we'll work through that. But I'm not going to be that guy to pretend that I'm going to do that. I will tell you that I will be the guy to sell, your hunting or recreational property, because I can intelligently speak about it. I know about the soils, I know about the trees, I know about the flora and fauna, all that stuff. So especially realtors or anybody in any specialty business is, it's a fun place to be, because you can really get to know your little niche. And to me, that's just a lot of fun.
Now, Chad, let's say somebody gets pre-approved and they're ready to pull the trigger. Walk us through some things that the property must have, in your opinion, to be what we're looking for and managing for deer and other wildlife.
Food, water, cover. And it doesn't have to be necessarily on that property, but it's got to be should be nearby. And, like we talked before we started recording a little bit, the location. So location, right? That's probably the most popular phrase in real estate. But the location is all relative to what you're used to hunting. But again, if you're used to hunting the rolling hills and steep hills of southern Ohio, southern Pennsylvania, the river bottom type stuff, you're used to deer traveling a ways, right, for food, water, and cover. I mean, they're moving a lot further to obtain those three items in those environments than they are in, say, fragmented agricultural areas, or even fairly populated agricultural zones of suburbs and stuff like that, right? You could have food, water, and cover on 10 acres. But in an ag environment that's fragmented with wood lots and swamps and stuff like that, lot that we have here in southern Michigan. But the food, water, and cover in southern Ohio, you may have to go on 1,000 acre piece. It may take to get that. Does that make sense, or is that?
Yeah, for sure.
You seen that situation where, I've leased ground in southeast Ohio where, there wasn't an ag field for several miles, but it was full of, other food sources, your browse and your, your oaks, your acorns and stuff like that.
Right.
So it's relative to what you're used to hunting. But yes, so food, water, cover, I'd say is number one, in a proximity to that parcel you're looking at. So if it's 5 acres, you're going to want to look at the neighbors and see what do they have. If it's 1,000 acres that you're looking at buying, well, then there's probably pretty good odds that you've got all those items on that property. So that's for sure, right? Because if there's no food, if you go into northern Michigan or northern Minnesota, upper peninsula of Michigan, your deer numbers can get very, very low per square mile in those areas just because there's no food. And I'd say that the food trumps everything, right? You can have all the great cover you want, but if that cover is not also food, those deer probably are not going to be there. So look for food, and then they got to have cover, and then the water, is down the line. Now you guys have both bought property, and are always looking at parcels. Am I way off base from coming from that angle? Because that's just what I own land, and I've inherited some land from family farm. But I've never specifically went out and purchased the land that I own now is on my home. I have never gone out and sought out a parcel of land to purchase for strictly hunting and recreation. So I am missing a little bit of that, but I have enough experience, obviously, to know that the food, cover, water is important. Do you guys have a different number one?
No, I think you're right on the money there. And I liked how you talked about setting, realistic expectations too. There is a lot that you can do to improve habitat and maybe have some bigger deer come stay at your place. But obviously you're not going to get Iowa-sized deer in northern Michigan or northern Minnesota, like you said. So, no, I think you're right on the money. That's definitely important. And yeah, I mean, without the food, water, cover, who knows where you could even go from there without it.
Yeah, and I suppose, I mean, you can take a blank canvas and build it from scratch, right? And you build it, they will come. One of my favorite movies, because that phrase, you build it, they will come, applies to so many things in life. But I've known several guys that have taken a 40-acre parcel, completely tillable, 100% tillable from front to back, left to right, and they did nothing but plant trees, plant shrubs, install a water source, whether it be a degraded wetland, or a drainage ditch that was built so that the area could be farmed. And if it's a private drain, you can plug that drain. If it's a county drain, you can't. If it's a private drain, you can plug that in, change the hydrology on that property, and just build it from scratch. The problem with that is, if you're going to buy a 40-acre piece of flat tillable land, you're going to pay a premium for it, for that land on a per acre basis, right? And so it just depends, your income status, right, is everything.
Yeah.
And,
how much time you have too.
yeah, money and time. And that's where there are guys like me and you, and there's people out there that have money but not time, so they hire wildlife contractors like myself to do things on their property to get what they're looking for. But the property doesn't have to be exactly what you're looking for. You just have to have the vision to tell. Well, if the broker doesn't, or the agent, doesn't have a background in wildlife habitat or deer hunting and stuff like that, he's not going to understand your vision and maybe not be able to carry it out. But how we plan things is that I can pull out of buyers what it is that they want. And I've sold people land that they would have, they've told me, I would have never considered this property if you didn't tell me X, Y, and Z, and how we could get to Z and make this something that I could really enjoy. They just didn't see it. And
so Chad, give us an example of what X, Y, and Z could be for just an average person. I mean, before we get to X, Y, Z, I think that it kind of relates to what you said about being realistic. I mean, if you're living up in Gaylord, Michigan, and hunting public ground every year, and you go buy a 80-acre piece in Hillsdale County, I mean, you're going to have different expectations than if you went the opposite direction to the UP and bought an 80-acre piece, right? So,
yeah.
like what would you suggest that XYZ is, or does it all depend on after talking to that person?
Yeah, it does. It changes all the time with buyers, and from one year to the next. I've had buyers' financial status change from month to month, to where we went from looking for $100,000 property to now, hey, we can look at $500,000 property, and totally the opposite. But I don't know. So there's so many examples or different scenarios on that one. But again, it's your agent. Doesn't have to be me, obviously. It could be anybody from the multiple recreational brokers in Michigan, but they should listen to what you want. So the less you talk and the more you listen, is a great way to go about real estate. And let those people tell you about their dreams and their desires, right? Sounds kind of corny, but let them tell you what their dreams and desires are. And then I also, I listen and like to know about how a person likes to hunt. Are they an archery and mainly October guy? Are they a strictly rut hunter only? And, this is all I want is a parcel that's going to be hot from November, Halloween to the opener of Firearm in Michigan, November 15th. So I hate to be vague, but every single person is going to be a little bit different in what their desires are. But that's my job, is to pull things out of them by listening first and then trying to add some things on to what they're really looking for and say, okay, now we can weed out this, and this property, because we're never going to get to your goals with this parcel. And it could be, I have to know that there's at least 150-inch deer in this section. Doesn't have to be on the 50 acres that I'm going to buy, but I have to know that they're in the area. And I'm going to hopefully steer them to, okay, this is not the area of Michigan that you're going to want to, be looking at.
Now, how do you determine that, Chad? Do you look up record book entries or talking to the locals, or have you got enough time invested in these areas that you kind of have a feel for it?
Yeah, strong. So I've been a volunteer with the Quality Deer Management Association since 2005. And I've been helping build QDM co-ops since, roughly about that time or just after. And so I've gotten to know co-op leaders, QDMA branch leaders within the whole state of Michigan. So I've got a pretty good feel on, in our, we're lucky here in Michigan, we have a wildlife co-op coordinator. Well, that position, unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 stuff, was just eliminated. But we have a QDM co-op website where you can get on and look at maps of where these co-ops are. And, we use that. And I've got relationships with lots of branch leaders and co-op leaders to be able to say, yeah, this is a great area, or, I've known this area to be an extremely hot zone for poaching. So there's no doubt knowledge of the local environment trumps a lot of things when you're able to, trying to speak intelligently about a piece of land or an area. So just reaching out and just knowing a lot of it, I'll tell you, the soils, so the animals and wildlife getting nutrients and getting age, right?
Right.
Age is huge. I've got a good friend that always busts my chops because, we always joke about, well, all they need is good soil and you'll have big bucks. And he's telling me, bullshit. All they need is age, and I, we kid back and forth because we know they're both true, but, age, there's no doubt if we're strictly discussing whitetails, age is the biggest factor in having a good rack, right? And then the outlying flying little morsels, that can make a 5-year-old 160 in Michigan, but that same 5-year-old is 180 in Illinois. then we can talk about soils, right? And the minerals and nutrients in those soils that can make the difference in inches.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm sure they're, I mean, they're both part of the equation, especially the age part. And I'm glad you brought up co-ops. That's one thing that I had to have as one of my requirements, was it had to be in or very close to a already established co-op. Hopefully the longer the better. We got guys like Corey who are starting their own, and hats off to those guys. And with the amount of resources out there through the QDMA or whatever they're called now, they're the NDA they joined up with. We had a listener, Eric Zielinski, actually was on a podcast with us. He reached out looking for one in New York, and we just got a hold of QDMA and figured out there was one nearby. And I'm not sure how close it actually was, but they're all over the place. So if you can get in touch with the right people, that's a good spot for me to long-windedly say you can get some age on your deer if everybody's on the same program in a cooperative.
mm-hmm.
That and cover or swamps, in my opinion. I think being next to a big swamp increases your chances of the deer making it to the next year. Unless you have Dan Infault nearby, then I'd be worried.
Right. Yeah, I think we've all heard stories of, deer, bucks in particular that, I've had landowners over the years tell me, I was in my stand on November 15th, which is, firearms opener in Michigan. He goes, I was overlooking a swamp meaning, this particular had 4 to 5 foot of water. I've had multiple landowners tell me that they have watched bucks come from an upland area, whether it's timbered or ag. They said they come down into this swamp and they either laid on a little island or a hummock. And I actually had one guy tell me, and I totally trust this guy. He said, I watched this buck stand. He had to lift his head up in the air to keep his nose out of the water. All I saw for about 5 or 6 hours was this buck's nose, head, and rack sticking up out of the water. He spent half of a day standing in that deep of water to avoid the predators, as a human.
Wow.
I've heard that on multiple occasions. The canoeing, the kayaking into sites, that's getting popular now, but in northern Michigan, that's been popular for a long, long time, of big buck killers. The Dead Stream Swamp in the Houghton Lake area, there's no doubt there's giant big bucks that die of old age up in some of those swamplands. So, but swamp means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So, it can maybe only be a few inches of water in reed canary grass with some autumn olive and Russian olive and, other types of trees, and they call that a swamp. Other guys call a swamp, 1,000 acres with just blueberry, brush and stuff like that, with just little islands here and there. And that's where those deer can really hide. And I think we've seen that now with some of the guys, right? The public land hunters and the Dan Infaults. What's the guys? The public...
Hunting public.
Yeah, I love watching their YouTube videos. Those guys are just the best. The Walmart camouflage and those guys are so much fun to watch. But they thrive on a lot of that stuff, right? Going to places that a lot of hunters won't go to just because they're flat out lazy. And it's just like finding a lease, like we talked about 45 minutes ago. Get your ass off the damn couch, fill the truck up with gas, and get out there and knock on some doors. You'll never know. I never expected when I drove 5.5 hours from Michigan to Ohio that in 2 days I would land on a parcel of my dreams. Just never expected it. And so, but I didn't, you didn't know that till you got your butt out there. So it's kind of the same thing with real estate. If you're looking to buy something, get out there and walk. I've showed guys 12, 15 different properties before they actually bought. And I've shown guys 12, 15 different parcels, and they never bought anything because they said, you know what, I thought what I wanted was out here, and they realized that it wasn't. And so we're still looking for them. And but just put yourself out there, right? Start looking around. Get your finances order first, because you can't buy it if you can't buy it. So, where do we? What do you want to talk about next?
Yeah, I think you're right on a lot of points there. And getting out there, I think I walked, I don't know, eight or 10 before I really started to see any sign. Like I just wasn't seeing the sign, and I got up next to a very, well, not very large, 300-400 acre swamp that mine kind of turns into and butts up to, and that was important to me. That was something I wanted. Now, if it's wet ground, though, that kind of drops your value a little bit if it's unusable. But if your value is deer hunting, then it doesn't really matter. So I guess swamp can affect your property value. What about like timber or tillable? How many people come up to you and say, I want 50-50 and it has to be, and then what do you say to that?
Most people that are predetermined with that, they've done their homework and they know that maybe having 51% tillable, changes your tax classification.
Mm-hmm.
It can make it an ag parcel versus a recreational or residential parcel. So, looking at those things too, it significantly drops your taxable value if you're looking at tillable land. But like I said before, you're going to pay the premium. There's, Brian, I don't know how, Pennsylvania has quite a different topography in land classifications, probably, and land values, kind of similar to Michigan. But, we can go in less than an hour in Michigan. We can go from land values of $2,500 an acre to $10,000 an acre in a matter of a couple counties.
Oh yeah. It's everywhere around Southwest PA, and even Ohio and West Virginia are like that too.
That's similar. Okay. So, and that's what once a week I get a phone call, from a potential seller. Well, what's land going for in Ingham County or Clinton County? And I'm like, okay, what township are you in? And then specifically, let's narrow that down even more, because that townships can change things. And that's mostly driven on tillable land, or maybe in the Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania scenario, gas leases. Would gas and oil leases be the significant driver in those areas?
Yeah, for sure.
What else in that area is farmland? Is there enough farmland in that zone what's the most significant driver of, say, $25,000 to $10,000? What's the biggest thing that changes that number?
I think the proximity to the bigger cities. If you get closer to Pittsburgh, or just talking Ohio wise, you get closer to Cleveland, seems like the acreage prices go way up. And also depends on how much you're buying too. It seems like, if you're buying a 20-acre parcel, you're not going to get the deal that you're going to get on, say, 100 or 200 or, several hundred acres.
Yeah. Yep, that's a fact. There's definitely a premium because the lower the acreage, the per acre price may go up, but it actually is still the total value on a smaller acreage parcel gets put into a lot more people's purchase price. So for example, I sold a parcel last December for over $7,000 an acre, but it was within 15 minutes of an urban area where both husband and wife worked, and it was only a 16-acre parcel. Right, so that's a parcel of land that a lot of people with reasonable means could write a check for, right? Pay cash for it. Now, that 100-acre piece at that price, right, is so far out of most of our buying capabilities at $700,000 to $800,000 that it's just like you don't even, right, you're not even going to look for something of that size. So, so the per acre price is typically going to go up in lower acreages. So that's a thing too, to look for and shop around at is, okay, well, if I move one county, can I buy 50 acres, instead of 30? And so there just is there's really a lot to look at when it comes down to, a lot of guys just go, well, I need it to be within a half an hour of my house so I can hunt it, after work and easily on the weekends and still be home to do things with the family. But then when you really start nitpicking, parcels, it can get kind of overwhelming to a buyer, and they just go, wow, I guess I really don't know what the heck I want because I didn't think about these things. But so yeah, the timber aspect, that's what's really attractive for me. And and I'm going to speak as from a buyer's perspective here at a parcel that I know somebody's looking at in Eastern Ohio that this parcel's got about a third of the value of the parcel is ready to be harvested. So bringing in, here's an option for somebody that maybe can't afford that 20% down payment on a 100-acre parcel. If there's enough timber value on it, maybe he or she could bring in ABC logging company and let them help you put that down payment down by having them put up some money for the purchase of that timber. And
have you seen that happen before?
Yes. Yep.
Where if I buy a property that has enough timber value on it for a down payment, if not more, you can actually have that contract done with the logger before you buy the property type thing. Maybe it's all contingent on the purchase, obviously, but that's interesting there.
Yeah, because you can, there's multiple ways that you can procure your down payment. And if you can, get a contract with a logging company, now, that logging company is going to say, okay, well, me writing you this check is contingent upon you owning the property. And well,
right.
You're like, well, I can't do this unless this happens. And so you can make things happen, at the same time at a closing table,
right.
To get to things to all fall into place. And, there's different ways to structure loans, bridge loans and stuff like that, to where you can bridge or leverage some, money, maybe equity in your home mortgage, and bridge that, into a short-term, short-term loan so that you can purchase that property and then, take the funds from a timber buyer and stuff and make it all work. You just got to be creative, and I think, like you mentioned, you had Dan Perez on, and that guy's a wealth of information, and a really good guy. That's the part I need to get stronger at, and I'll be the first one to admit I need to get stronger in that investment side of parcels. I've got the basic knowledge and getting better with it all the time. He seems like he's got it very well down pat, listening to him on your podcast and some others. He's a fun guy to listen to.
No, he sure is.
So yeah, go ahead, Brian.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
So yeah, I'm just, as another example, they just, again, I'm knocking on doors, and my habitat background, there's a parcel in Hillsdale County, Michigan that I'm just drooling over, that I've done some work on, and the landowner is, never been married, and I'd love to get them to put this parcel on the market, but it's, some basic estimates is, this parcel's got way into the six figures of walnut trees on it. It's just an incredible parcel full of very mature black walnut, which, has kept its monetary value throughout, some of the different ups and downs of timber values. And so I'm just drooling over this piece, hoping that, at some point it can come on the market, either, with me, my brokerage, or somebody else. But, again, that one is, you can only value a property so high, and it's only going to appraise so high. And if you need to, if you need a lender, to provide financing for you, they're only going to loan so much on the appraised value. And, this, you can only use timber, the true timber value, you can only use that, to increase your overall value of the land so much. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if there's, $200,000 of walnut on this property, it's not going to make it appraise 200,000 over what it normally would, if that makes sense. So
right,
there's opportunities on pieces of land like that where you can have a tremendous amount of equity already there, as soon as you purchase it. So that's the great and fun thing that I really enjoy about real estate is finding those unique parcels, finding that landowner, finding that seller, advising them on certain things that, they might not have known about, that, can increase the value of their land to a degree, but then also really entice a buyer to say, look, you may buy this place for $500,000, but it's already got $200,000 in marketable timber ready to go. Who wouldn't want to walk into a situation like that?
Absolutely. So switching gears, let's say, you find property that fits your budget. It pretty much has the majority of what you're looking for, but there's a few things missing. What are some of the things you could add? Maybe the top three that are easy to fix, and maybe the top three that are hardest to fix. Walk us through that.
An easy to fix would be maybe creating some habitat, whether that be with hinge cutting, with planting trees, shrubs, switchgrass, native warm season grasses. That can increase your habitat quickly if you don't have it. But let's be realistic. It can also take several years to do that, but at least you have the option to do it. So the quick things, I guess the habitat could be quick and long term. I guess I'm just thinking here, your hinge cutting scenario, can be a quick habitat. and food source quickly by dropping some trees on the ground, and those, buds and little ends of the branches and twigs and stuff like that can provide a quick food source. Water sources, it doesn't take long to get a mini excavator, bulldozer, or even just the front end loader or a back blade on a 30 horse tractor, or a shovel for, you can create a quick water source. I listened to your podcast with Lincoln Roan just recently with Packer Max, and him installing his little water hole. And I just did that. My son and I just did that 200 yards from my, the back of my house a little over a week ago. We just installed a quick water hole. We've got one county drain going through the far western end of our square mile, and that's pretty much the only water source here. So, I've got 6 275 gallon totes, and I use for various things, but I can, within a couple hours I can create a water source. Something we haven't talked about is access or lack of it. We can you can take a parcel that maybe had trespass issues, and you can very quickly thwart a lot of that with maybe a gate out front and a lot of signs, no trespassing signs. It never hurts to have a buddy that works for the local police department or conservation officer, and maybe invite him out for a few hunts. Guess what he's going to do? When he's not hunting, if he works in that jurisdiction, he's going to cruise by that parcel every once in a while and help you keep an eye on it. That's not a bad tactic.
Right.
I've been on both sides of that. So let's see. That was the first part of your question. Is that right? Some quick things to
Sure.
to do. Yeah. And so a few things that may take some more time. Maybe let's throw something out there that probably a lot of guys haven't heard, is the Wetland Reserve Enhancement Program. That's if you're in a zone, and I'm talking about zones, I'm talking about areas of a state or a county that have highly erodible lands with a lot of water hydrology in them that have been degraded by farming practices. So trenching, tiling, ditch building, etc. There are programs there that you can enroll in, which would, so you want to enhance an old wetland. And so some of those programs will pay you. So the government's going to pay you up to 90% value of the property. You're going to get a check for that. So let's say you bought a parcel for, $100,000, and you found out that it was eligible for this program. And then it's a long process. It can be a year to 3 years to get enrolled in one of these. But you can get reimbursed up to 90% of the appraised value of that parcel is going to come back to you. But then, there's a deed restriction placed on that parcel.
Right.
But then they're going to enhance or restore the wetlands, okay, that once we're on that property. And then there's an upland component to that wetland enhancement. So you're going to get some maybe shrub, brush, or native warm season grass plantings in with those wetland reconstructions. So you can end up, basically owning a nice chunk of land for almost $0, and then have it for your, hunting paradise. Now, there's a handful of restrictions on those, and then they can be very difficult to resell, because now you've got a parcel of land that has a deed restriction that's either going to sit on it for 30 years or a lifetime. That would be something that would take a while, but it's definitely doable. And I've dealt with a lot of them. I've sold them, I've listed them, and I've also been the guy sitting on the bulldozer, the excavator, or the tractor, restoring the habitat on a property that had been, a wetland that had been degraded. So I guess that's an example of a really long term. You guys got to be thinking of something in your head that's more something that's long term. How about creating a pond that's stocked full of big rainbow trout? Right? That could take multiple years to do that.
Sure. Now, getting back to the trespassing, just to follow up on that, what do you recommend, or what kind of ideas you have for like trying to find out how the neighbors are? Because that could be real difficult, where you get like a perfect piece in a perfect place, and then things just go south once you're in there and dealing with the wrong kind of neighbors.
Yeah, and that's a lot of times that's the homework that both the agent and the prospective buyer need to do and then be comfortable with. And the co-op factor, like Jared had mentioned, that was very important to him, and it truly is. But I'll just be honest with you, when you get in a co-op, you can have some very, very possessive landowners within a co-op who could be just as much of a nightmare as a neighboring landowner in an area that has no co-ops and is known for poaching at night. So do your homework. There's only so far you can go, though, right, with the homework. At some point, you just got to say, okay, I like this property enough. I'm going to take my chances. I'm going to go over and meet the neighbors. We're going to get to know each other. And, I think I think the biggest couple things is, don't walk in and as a new landowner and start to bully your neighbors, right? And say, and I'm not shooting, this turkey unless it's a 12-inch beard. Don't start demanding things when you're the new guy on the block, right? You should kind of walk in with your tail between your legs, invite some neighbors over for a campfire, throw some venison and sweet corn on the grill, have a few cocktails, and just get to know them, right? That's the best thing is people are going to have a hard time trespassing on your land if they just came to your property 2 weeks ago and ate some of your venison and drank some of your Busch Light, right?
That's a good point.
You'd hope so anyway, but yeah, that's good advice for sure.
Well, and if they, and then if, let's just cut to it. If they're the asshole, then after that, well, then they're just an asshole, period.
Yeah.
Right? You're probably never going to win them over, or they're just not generally a good person overall. So I guess then it is what it is at that point. You're just going to make the best of it. But I think that's where the co-ops are, the co-op thing with having a big buck night and having a chili cook-off and having a summer sweet corn roast and having, different events, it turns into a neighborhood watch, right? Just like the subdivision in Brighton, Michigan, that's got a badass neighborhood watch with, Karens all over the place calling the police on everybody. Who's the male equivalent of Karen? Isn't it Brad's or Chad's?
I think it's Chad's.
Yeah,
You got me.
It's Chad's and someone else.
Brian's and Chad's. you know, it never, you know, it just, you know, knowing your neighbors is never a bad thing. And I think that's some of the trouble with owning maybe a piece of land that's, you know, over a half an hour from you, or an hour is, you know, you can't, I like to show up, you know, if I was a non-resident landowner, I'd want to show up on a Tuesday morning, you know, and hang out on the property for a half an hour, you know, just as much as I would the Saturday, Sunday type of thing. And, you know, just be around at strange times so people can't put a pattern on you, and park your truck in different places, or, you know, have a buddy drop you off and go out hunting. And, you know, be hunting when there's no vehicle parked, you know, at the gate or along the side of the road, and then, you know, see if you got somebody sneaking on that way. But, you know, your neighbors are always going to be your greatest or your worst, you know, enemy. So most of the time they're going to be great. And that's what most of these co-ops, the feedback that we get is, you know, this is the greatest thing I've ever done, is become a part of this co-op. Everybody's watching out for each other. You know, they called me because they saw a spotlight shining around on my property and they want to know if it was me. And, you know, and so, you know, we recently, I'll throw this out there at you. We recently had a neighboring co-op member was out cutting firewood, and he had a tree fall on his head. Just really put him in a bad spot, and he's pretty much out of the woods, but he's, you know, he probably doesn't sound like he's going to work again, and he probably won't ever drive again. He's just, but, you know, we're all thankful because he's alive, right? So you look at the positive end of things. But from that instant, one of our co-op leaders is now going to, he's going to create a text tree, so that, you know, a lot of times when you're out cutting, when you're hinge cutting, you're probably doing it with a couple buddies, right? If you're cutting firewood for your home or deer camp, a lot of times you're just doing it at opportune times and you're by yourself. Well, this guy is going to, that co-op is going to have a call text group, so that, you know, Jared's going to go out Sunday morning at 10 and cut firewood, you know, behind Joe Smith's house, and he's only going to be there for a couple hours. He's going to group text, you know, everybody that wants to be on that group text and say, hey, I'm going out to cut firewood. I'm only going to be out there for 2 hours. I'll text you. I'll group text everybody, you know, when I'm, you know, back to the house, kind of thing. And in this instance, this gentleman laid there in the woods for quite a few minutes. Luckily, his brother heard the chainsaw idling. His brother was, funny enough, was putting in a food plot this spring, and, you know, a few hundred yards away was the other brother cutting wood, and he heard the chainsaw idling for about 10 minutes and said, yeah, that's just not right. So he drove over there and found his brother laying there, you know, in a mess, and pretty much saved his life. So, you know, this guy's implementing that, and that all spurred from a co-op, right? A deer management co-op is now going to hopefully help, you know, a guy, you know, be safe in the woods. And so that's another thing, I'm getting into a habit, you know, and you can do this with your neighbor. I'm trying to get into a habit with my wife. You know, I'm going to text you when I get in the tree stand. And when I get out and I'm in the truck on the way home, I'm texting you again. I've checked in and I've checked out, and you know, I'm safe. So sorry, again, another 15-minute answer to your question.
No, I mean, those are important points. Like the chili cook-off thing, that's kind of what we do in our cooperative. We have exactly what it is, a chili cook-off, and everybody brings in some nice racks, and you kind of just lead by example if you're one of the leaders out there shooting the nice bucks and try to get everybody else on board. And it seems to be a, a great thing. I know my one neighbor down where my property is, he's awesome. He helps me out, whether it's dragging a deer out, if it's way back in the swamp, or whether there's a random truck at the gate, he'll text me or call me. I mean, you can't buy that stuff if your neighbor is an a-hole. So you got to really, I like your idea of inviting them all over and hanging out, or at least saying hi. I mean, I use that HuntWise app, and you can click on the landowner and search their phone records and then call them from the app. So if you don't even know the guy, never talked to him in your life, you get a wild hair after listening to this podcast, you can literally look them up, call them up, and make an introduction. It's as simple as that. So I think that was a great point to hit there, Chad. Nice work. Well, I think we've hit a bunch of good information on this subject tonight. I want to wrap up the way I usually always do. If you're walking through a new listing, or you're selling somebody's property, or maybe you're walking with a buyer, and you come across a specific tree, what's your favorite tree that you come across? You're like, oh man, I love that tree. Could be for hunting or habitat, could be browse, could be cover. What tree really gets Chad Thalin excited?
Lots of branches with great hiding spots for me hanging in my saddle. I love them. Big mature oak or maple that's probably 100+ years old, and it's got, the branches are bigger than most trees that are coming up out of the ground. I like a good mature oak and maple tree. Climb up in there and you just kind of fade away into that bark and disappear. That's those, because I would love to know everything that tree has seen over its lifetime. Could you imagine everything that's walked past that tree? If you could see that in about a 5-minute video clip, could you?
Yeah, that'd be crazy.
The people, the wildlife, the different times that it's seen, and I love old, mature, just old and mature, I guess, would be my favorite tree.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, cool. I wanted to see if anybody else wanted to find out more about you, your company, your services you offer. Where can they find you, Chad?
Okay, so Instagram at Stoney Creek Realty. Facebook is same, and then our website is StoneyCreekOutdoors.com. On there, all kinds of contact buttons. 517-819-6344. 517-819-6344. Cell phone I've had for 20 years. Call me, text me. That's probably the easiest way to be assured that I get a message. And, we'd love to help you out if you're in Michigan, if you're in Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio. We're coming soon. I'd love to hear from you if you're in those states and you need help with habitat work or real estate advice. I'd love to have a chance to work with you.
Awesome. Well, Chad, I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight, and we will get this launched here pretty soon, and then we got to get together on a couple habitat projects, creating some videos. I think that would be a good time as well.
Yeah, I'd love to do it.
All right. Thanks so much, Chad, for coming on the line. Had a great talk with you there. Really glad to have you on and learn a few more things there. I didn't know you could even use a logger to pay your down payment. That is some pretty fascinating stuff. Yeah, I learned a few things there. So thanks for coming on. I thought it was a great chat. And we'll obviously be hearing more from you soon on our next trivia night. So if everybody hasn't followed along with our Habitat Podcast trivia, it is live on Facebook. We do it every other month. It's been a fun time so far. And all of our listeners are pretty darn smart. We haven't fooled anybody yet. So maybe we have to amp up the questions, make them a little harder. So check us out on Facebook. We also have an Instagram account, YouTube, but all the good stuff is on habitatpodcast.com. All the episodes, 100, 125, maybe even 150 plus hours now of free Habitat content, guys. Check it out. Leave us a good review on iTunes. I'll send you a free decal. Just get a hold of me. I'm sending out a bunch this week, so those who haven't got them yet, they're coming out. And thank you for the reviews for everybody there. I want to thank our sponsors of the show. We have Michigan Whitetail Pursuit, Packer Max Cultipackers, Killer Food Plots, the Habitat Hook, Huntwise, Stoney Creek Realty, and Sound Barrier Hunting. Thank you all so much. Thanks for tuning in as we become better habitat managers. We'll see y'all next week. We got a couple regular dudes from Ohio coming on, along with a big name you've probably heard coming on soon. So take care. Talk to you soon.